everyone, welcome. This is India Tonight. I'm Shubhani Gharat, and joining us is also my colleague Sumita Karir from our Delhi studio. Now, Sumita, in a significant diplomatic development amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, the first known trilateral talks involving officials from Russia, Ukraine and United States are underway in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. The two-day negotiations running from January 23rd to 24th mark the first time representatives from all three nations have met together since Russia's full-scale invasion nearly 4 years ago. The talks follow announcements from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy during the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he also delivered a sharp critique of European allies.
Absolutely, Shubhani. In fact, President Zelensky stated that European leaders aren't really doing enough to push this war to an end, to push President Putin to end this war. And European leaders, remember, they were notably absent from this new format. And that really raises questions about shifting alliances and the United States-led push for a resolution under the current administration. So could these historic trilateral discussions signal the beginning of the end of the Russia-Ukraine war, while optimism should be kept in check with deep divisions over territory and security guarantees still evident? Many observers see this as a potential breakthrough in months of behind-the-scenes diplomacy. Is there going to be a breakthrough or not? To discuss that and more, I'm now joined by Ksenia Kondryeva. She is a senior Russian journalist. Also joining along with Ksenia is Dr. Rajan Kumar. He's an associate professor of the School of International Studies at JNU. Thank you very much, Ksenia and Dr. Rajan, for taking the time out and speaking to us on this very, very crucial issue. This is a first-of-its-kind format that is being currently implemented. But how will a long-term deal be reached since Russia wants territories it has annexed or partially annexed, and Ukraine is fighting tooth and nail to protect them?
Are you asking me?
Yes, Dr. Rajan.
Yeah, so this deal is important. This meeting is important. This is happening. They are saying it official, but let me tell you that unofficially they have met trilaterally at other places. But this is the first official meeting, what they are saying, trilateral meeting, where US, Russia, and Ukraine all are participating. The issue remains the issue of territory, that because Russia has said very clearly that it will not compromise on the issue of either in the entire Donbas region. And in Donbas, you have Luhansk and this what you call Donetsk region, and also the issue of Zaporizhia, where you have the biggest nuclear plant, and the issue of Kherson. So Russia's maximalist demand is that Russia will not compromise, and the area, for instance, in the Donbas region, 80% of the territory is under Russian control and 20% is still under Ukrainian control. So the Russian demand is that Ukraine should withdraw from the entire Donbas region. So that's the first issue related to territory. But the second issue is related to a security guarantee, because I'm sorry. Yeah. So the second issue is related to security guarantee. On the issue of security guarantee, Ukraine is saying that it should have not NATO, because Ukraine knows that NATO membership is not possible at this point of time. So Ukraine is asking for some kind of security guarantee where that US can assure Ukraine that in the post-ceasefire kind of situation, the security of Ukraine can be ensured. But Russia will not agree to any kind of either NATO membership or even the military forces from Ukraine, what Europe calls this coalition forces. So Russia is unlikely to agree to that kind of agreement where European coalition forces would be protecting Ukraine. So these are the major issues in my view. But yes, let me tell you that there has been some progress, and this might be the right moment for Ukraine to go for the ceasefire and agree for the deal, for the simple reason that Russia has the military advantage at this point of time, and Russia is not willing to compromise, and Russia is not willing to give any concession to Ukraine on the issue of territory or on the issue of NATO membership. What Russia might agree that yes, that if there is some kind of developmental common project that Russia might agree with Ukraine. Russia also might agree on supplying energy, supplying power from the same Zaporizhia plant to Ukraine. But beyond that, on the issue of because Russia has massive advantage, and at this point of time, Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, is facing a massive electricity crisis because most of the power production plants have been damaged because of Russian attack, and Ukraine is under massive pressure. And now Russia, the kind of legitimacy that Europe was talking about, that the territory of a sovereign country has been occupied by Russia, that also now it's very difficult for Europe and Ukraine to argue after what Trump has done in Venezuela, and also his demands for Greenland, because now these countries, at least the NATO countries, they do not have the legitimacy that they used to have earlier before the action in Venezuela and Greenland. So Russia has advantage, and the deal is not, it's not easy. And let me tell you, the deal would primarily happen on the terms and conditions of Russia, because of the Russian, very strong position in Ukraine at this point.
Absolutely. Let's go over to Senia to get her view and understanding on how does she view, these talks, the ongoing, ongoing current technical talks that are happening in UAE. How is the political elite and also the people of Russia looking at these technical talks that are happening in UAE? Give us an understanding on that front as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all. Well, I totally agree with Professor on the key factors that are shaping up these, talks. I wouldn't call it a deal. Of course, there is, I think we're far away from a deal. But the talks are proceeding, and they are, they were in general shaped up by Alaska talks. Very important because when we see the way Europe is sidelined from this, and Europe is the major supporter of Ukraine, of course, in this conflict, they have not spoken to Russian leader, unlike Trump, and they are effectively sidelined, and they issue the statements on the daily basis. But there is no legitimacy, and especially with the Greenland saga, as Professor mentioned, going on, there are lots of questions of, what kind of, first of all, what kind of guarantees the European support of Ukraine can provide, and secondly, on what the world order is today about. I think the talks that we still don't know with what time they will start. Probably they are ongoing already. There is less clarity on that. They will be tough, but they're very significant because these are the first trilateral talks at that kind of level with that kind of engagement. It's all the military. If you see the delegations from both sides, and primarily from Russian side and the Ukrainian side, these are military officials. But what is important, on the sidelines, or rather separately from those talks, there also will be a bilateral meeting between Russia and US, and that would be held by or led by economic negotiators from both sides. And why it is important, if you remember correctly, the talks in Alaska, the two countries the two leaders spoke about the economic engagement between the two countries, and these are the two huge economies, huge oil economies. Russia is also a huge nuclear economy, vast territory that borders, and that's why talks happen in Alaska. So they're talking about possible forest development, which has been happening in early 2000s when U.S. oil and gas companies were exploring the fields in Russia. So there's a lot that can happen, and I think U.S.-Russia engagement at the moment is much beyond the Ukraine issue, which is very important to understand how the talks over Ukraine can go ahead.
Absolutely, senior. So it remains to be seen whether there's going to be any breakthrough or not, and whether it is Ukraine, which will end up giving away more concessions as far as arriving, or at least starting of these talks is concerned, and arriving at a peace deal is concerned. But let me come to you, Dr. Kumar. Dr. Kumar, you've of course alluded to a whole host of factors. The fact that, Russia won't agree to any military forces. Russia is not going to cede any territory. So let me ask you a follow-up question to that. Is President Putin actually serious about having a deal and actually ending the war? Or is he just capitalizing on the opportunity, seeing the fact that, ties between European leaders, European countries and the United States have been rather strained? And of course, President Trump's leverage might have reduced, given the fact that he himself has sort of talked about annexing Greenland. And of course, we've all seen what's happened with Venezuela.
Yes, absolutely. First, let me tell you that Russia is serious about the peace deal. Russia doesn't want just a ceasefire, because Russia thinks that that a ceasefire would be used by Ukraine and European countries to strengthen the army, to have a breathing space for remobilization, etc. So Russia is not interested in the ceasefire, and also it is not interested in ceasefire because it has upper hand in the military sphere there. But Russia wants a peace deal, but Russia wants peace deal on its own condition. First, that, as I said, the territory that it has occupied, Russia will not withdraw from that. And that's pretty clear to all the negotiators, and including United States. Second, on the issue, after what happened on the issue of Greenland or Venezuela, so Russia has got a kind of justification for its own act. Putin might tell to his audience that he has been proven right, that might is right, and nobody is bothered about the sovereignty of a smaller and weaker state. What matters is the national security. So that gives a very strong supporting logic to Putin, and in a way, he feels vindicated, and his position has been justified by the acts of President Trump. So there is Russia. Russia doesn't want to continue the war. That's also a fact. But now, after having committed so much of military resources, and fighting war for the last 4 years, Russia will not withdraw just because there is some pressure from the European country, and Russia knows that European countries are not in position to push Russia back on the issue of Ukraine, and Putin knows the weakness of Europe. Putin
Absolutely. On that note, in fact, Dr. Rajan, I want to ask you, sorry for interrupting you, but I want to ask you, on that note, Zelensky, in fact, framed the conflict in terms of the future global leadership rather than a regional war. And, he also made some very strong comments in the criticism of Europe. So how might Russia leverage some of his statements, in the criticism of Europe to push their own narrative about Western weakness and, the entire encirclement of it?
That Davos speech of Zelensky was very interesting because he was speaking like a very powerful, assertive leader. But let me tell you, Zelensky's position has come because of European support. Even when he came to power, it was because of the American Biden support, and he would not have remained in power without the support of United States Biden administration earlier and European countries. But yes, he pointed out two things in particular in this Davos speech. He said that the way European countries are defending Greenland, for instance, they are not committed to Ukraine in the same way, and he's right about it. Europe's commitment to its own territory is much more than the kind of commitment that it has given to Ukraine. Europe is not willing to send the NATO army. Europe is not willing to provide the resources that Ukraine needs to defend itself. So he was pointing out that and he also said that European countries are not united so far as European support to Ukraine is concerned, and that's a reality. But he should have understood that much earlier. Why did he go for a war with such a powerful country when he knows that you cannot fight a war with support of outside? So and his position and Russia also gives his own narrative, saying that he's not a legitimate leader, his term is over, he's not going for election, and there's a lot of corruption, etc. So these are the arguments given by Putin to what you said, to your question, that how Russia will try to change this narrative. So Russia's narrative, there are three important things. First, as I was saying, that national interest matters, and if the issue of Russian security comes, Russia is free to send its military to neighboring territory to defend its own people. So it's because of the what Trump has done in Venezuela, what Trump has done in the Greenland. So that's the supporting logic. And now the issue of Zelensky not being a legitimate leader, so that will also be raised by Russia against the arguments of European countries. And the European countries' narrative that Russia is going to capture Poland or Latvia, Lithuania, Baltic countries. I think that's a false narrative. Russia does not have interest in reviving Soviet Union. Nothing of that sort.
Right, Dr. Kumar. Thank you very much for wonderfully explaining that particular point. Let me come to you, Senia. Is President Putin really interested in bringing about this war to a halt? What is the sense that you get, especially as far as the present circumstances are concerned? Of course, the European leaders are much more concerned about their own security. They have a Greenland issue at hand to deal with. There's going to be a board of peace. France is, of course, not on the best of terms with the United States, as are many other countries. So what is President Putin thinking at this point in time, especially as far as these trilateral talks are concerned? And do you think that President Putin could give significant concessions to Ukraine?
See, Russia has been gaining more and more territories. It has an upper hand on the battlefield. So one would say that this is not the right moment. I mean, if you see the past 3 months, the kind of gains were made, on the ground. Given that Russia wants the entire territory of Donbass because it kind of included these regions in its own territory as per the Russian constitution since 2023. But Vladimir Putin wouldn't have all these talks and all these meetings with, starting with President Trump and then his envoys if he wasn't serious about peace, right? So definitely Russia is serious, but Russia is serious about the issues why this conflict started in the first place. It's an issue of security. Russia saw what was happening in Ukraine as an existential threat. I'm sorry if my network is interrupted. Definitely, Russia will be very serious in discussing the terms and conditions. It doesn't want to see NATO troops in Ukraine. It doesn't want to see NATO weapons in Ukraine. And of course, it wants sort of border understanding and that sense of security that it didn't have for the past 10 years. Also, Russia stated on many occasions that since a large chunk of Ukrainian population is Russian-speaking, with the Russian Orthodox faith, and you have to see what's happening with the Russian language, with people speaking Russian language, with education in Russian language, and with the, faith that follows the Russian Orthodox tradition. Priests have been thrown into prisons, churches, closed, shut down. So this is something that Russia also will not allow to happen in the neighboring country. So these are the issues. But what's important here is that European countries that are also Russia's neighbors. You mentioned they are not on good terms with the US, and now they're seeing what's happening with Greenland. I think they are completely powerless and they will not have any kind of a role to play in these negotiations, so as Ukraine up to a certain extent. Because, again, you mentioned Zelensky's speech and his rage over Ukraine's supporters in Europe. But you have to see what's happening in Ukraine today. The capital, Kyiv, is freezing, and local authorities are saying that the situation is going to get worse. More than, I think, I was reading today the figure of 600,000, 6 lakhs. People have left in the past couple of weeks because the houses are freezing. Now, these strikes against the civilian civilian energy infrastructure, not the one that powers, military sites. I think Vladimir Putin said in September last year that Russia has not responded to similar strikes from Ukraine for a long, long time, but now that's there's going to be the end to that. And what we see today, what we see happening today is absolute inability of Zelensky's office, Zelensky himself and his office, to control the situation and answer to their own people. Yeah. Of course, it's difficult to stand these kind of sufferings, and we see it. I see it on my social media all the time. I feel bad for the people, but is their leader. And if you remember about Davos, he initially said that he's not going to Davos because he's going to address the energy crisis in Ukraine. But then the moment Mr. Trump mentioned him, he flown to Davos and he delivered his speech.
Because it was a strong platform to deliver that speech with the world leaders.
Possibly, but realities on the ground demand Ukraine's move towards peace as well.
Yes.
So we have to ask whether both Russia and Ukraine at this point are ready to actually talk, negotiate on the deal.
My question to you is, being a journalist, also help us understand what is Kremlin's domestic narrative about this entire technical talks. Are they presenting it to your people, to the Russians, as a genuine pursuit of peace, or as the evidence that, finally West is finally willing to accept, the Russian core demands?
I don't think there is any kind of this presentation being made. They're presenting it as talks, as, an important a milestone that probably we're going to see if there are any outcomes of these talks, because again, there has to be, had been several rounds of those talks. I think the Russian, population, the citizens of Russia, they also would want to see an end to the ongoing conflict for many reasons. But then there is a complete understanding in the society why this conflict is happening, and that the kind of goals that Russia has in this conflict, that it matters to the country, because we cannot compromise on the security.
Senior, let me go to Dr. Rajan, and let me ask you, Dr. Rajan. Now, since these talks are happening, and of course these are historic in a sense, these are special in a sense, since all three sides are coming together. But what is it that we could expect once these talks are over, and what could be the first set of agreements? How could they look like?
I think this is important, and if you go by the statements which have been made by the American side, so they are saying that they're very close to the deal. What does it mean if you interpret that statement? So it essentially means that on most of the issues there is an agreement, except probably the issue of territory at this point, because the main issue, as the previous panelist pointed out, the security of Ukraine, now the NATO membership is ruled out, and European countries sending forces. I think that again Russia probably can compromise on that. But the issue of territory is somewhere where they are stuck, because it would be extremely politically detrimental and politically suicidal for Zelensky to withdraw from the area which actually is with Ukraine, but Russia is asking that Ukrainian army should withdraw from their territory. That is a difficult political proposition for Zelensky, and that is where the deal has the deal is stuck in my view. But yes, I think some kind of compromise might emerge, where they might say that some kind of development projects would be undertaken in the area, the 10% of area which Russia does not control in the Donbas region. So the deal is stuck there only, I believe. And also, one issue what Russia might be pushing to, especially in the bilateral meeting with the United States, is the issue of frozen assets. Because as you know, that Russia claims that 350 some odd $1 billion of Russia, that has been frozen in different European banks and US banks, etc. So Russia would be saying that you have to release that money, and you cannot use that money for the development of Ukraine. what some of the European countries have been saying,
Absolutely.
although Belgium also didn't accept that proposal. But that remains, from Russian perspective, an important issue. And then again, Russia would be asking for lifting of sanctions, because Russia is a completely sanctioned country. So these are the issues that Russia will be discussing bilaterally with the United States. But otherwise, on the trilateral issue, the issue of territory, 10% territory, and how that would be negotiated, that's the main issue.
Sure. Very interesting points made, Dr. Rajan and Senia. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today. I'm afraid we are